Hey there, this is episode 109 of the first 10 minutes. I'm Tony Parmenter.
I'm Steve Halliwell.
And I'm Aaron Williams.
And this is a video games podcast where we play the first 10 minutes of a video game. Then we sit down here to discuss how well that game communicates itself to the player, both in terms of what the game is about and how to play the game. And in response to our latest listener poll, which you can find at the first 10 minutes on Twitter, you, the listeners, voted for us to play The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit. And I played this one. Gentlemen, would you like to hear all about it?
I would.
Sure would.
Tremendous. So Wikipedia defines The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit as a free graphic adventure game developed by Don't Nod Entertainment and published by Square Enix. It was released on the 25th of June 2018 for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One as a demo for the upcoming Life is Strange 2. Life is Strange 2 still, of course, not released yet. As best as I can tell, the characters in this demo of Captain Spirit don't have any connection at all to the characters or the setting of Life is Strange, but the tone and the mood and the style of game are very much in sync. Steam defines this game by saying, "Have you ever dreamt of being a superhero? Meet Chris, a creative and imaginative 9-year-old boy who escapes reality with fantastical adventures as his alter ego, the awesome Captain Spirit. Captain Spirit is a free demo set in the Life is Strange universe." Would you like to hear some Steam tags?
Fuck yeah.
So Steam defines this game as a free-to-play, story-rich, choices matter, adventure, atmospheric, great soundtrack, single-player drama, superhero, point-and-click, walking simulator, memes, short game. Not one of those long memes games.
No.
We all know that memes are best when they're really protracted.
That's true.
They're the ones that really catch on.
So, the video game itself begins with a rather lovely montage of very cold weather, a cold weather environment far, far colder than I'm accustomed to here in Queensland.
In that there's snow.
There is plenty of snow. There's plenty of snow. There's plenty of yon pine trees. And there is a rather lovely track playing over this introduction, which is by Sufjan Stevens. The track is titled Death with Dignity. If you're interested, recommend looking it up. It's pretty good.
It's them Square Enix dollars at play.
It is. I also recommend that if you're going to check things out, that you go and check out the video of this playthrough, which will be on our YouTube channel, and the link will be in the show description notes on this very podcast that you are listening to. So we get sort of a series of rather beautifully composed cinematic shots of this location. There's a small house in the middle of what looks like a sort of a semi-rural area. It's got a small town kind of vibe to it. My assumptions from being familiar with Life is Strange is that this will be somewhere in the Northwest. But I mean, I'm purely drawing on the fact that Life is Strange was set in that location. And we get a series of shots outside of this house. It's clearly wintertime and quite cold. So there's shots of tree houses in the backyard, letterboxes. And we get a nice reverse shot, seeing a slow sort of push into a child's bedroom. I can tell this because there are large sort of stickers on the window. And when it cuts to the inside,
What are you trying to say?
a series of...
Sorry. Got stickers on my window?
Are they two very large stickers that are clearly placed in the bottom half of a window where a child could reach them?
It's none of your business.
As somebody who has had experience having to clean up sticker catastrophes of a young child, maybe there are some small tells here that I'm seeing.
I'll defer to you.
Set off my dad radar.
Yeah, I'll defer to you, Dad.
So once we're inside here, this is clearly a young child's bedroom. There are plenty of toys and bits and pieces everywhere, little basketballs and toy swords and walkie-talkies, baseball statues, and so on and so on. And we're very swiftly introduced to Chris. So Chris is sitting in his room alone, talking to himself and using his imagination to have a bit of a game with a spaceship and a couple of small, looks like wooden toys. And he's playing make-believe as if these two are exploring an alien planet, and then things are going wrong and they require rescuing, and they call out for Captain Spirit to help them. And then we get a little bit of I've kind of described it here in my notes as a fake out, but it's only a fake out because I've played Life is Strange. Life is Strange itself involving the main character Max's ability to rewind time, and then the various consequences that result from her ability to do that. And then all of the other things that flow out from it. If you're completely fresh to this game, then I'm actually a bit curious as to whether this sequence has the same impact or means the same thing. But we see Chris sort of lift his hand up, Jedi style, to try and perform telekinesis on this toy spaceship to help these toys out. We get a slow push in on the ship, which then starts wobbling and floating up into the air, until it's eventually revealed that Chris is, of course, just holding it with his other hand as he pretends to use telekinesis and fly the ship around and save the day.
We have no proof that he's pretending.
Yeah.
It could be telekinesis. The other hand could just be there for support.
Yeah. In case it drops.
I'm going to plead the fifth and say not in this 10 minutes.
Okay, all right.
So I had not played Life is Strange. I knew that time was a part of it in some way, shape, or form. This sequence to me certainly didn't evoke Life is Strange, but to me it was just a kid playing with their imagination, letting their imagination run the show. And so I think that it kind of in that way sort of has a dual purpose.
Sure. Well, it can certainly work just at face value as a kid using their imagination. But when it says on the tin, yo, download this free demo, which is a prequel to Life is Strange 2. You might remember us from such games you loved as Life is Strange about time manipulation. Yeah. This is definitely playing to an invested audience.
He's in training.
In that regard. And for me, it sort of made me do a bit of a double take and go, what, already?
Yeah.
But of course it wasn't. So Chris is quite happy that he saved the day. He then begins sketching his Captain Spirit costume because he needs to figure out what Captain Spirit is going to wear and look like in order to be able to himself begin to get dressed up as this alter ego. He says that he already has a cape, but now it is up to Tony, the player of the video game, to start making some choices matter choices. The first choice that the game presents to me is whether Captain Spirit will have a mask or a helmet. I picked helmet. The reason why I picked helmet was because
we live in a post-Iron Man world.
I actually think it's cooler to be overtly yourself.
To be Iron Man.
In a funky costume, doing some cool things.
Yeah.
We're not going to have any IP infringement here, Steve.
I am the money man.
Metal suit rich man.
So I select helmet. Chris then proceeds to sketch and pops the helmet on. And the next choice that I am offered is whether to have light armor or heavy armor. I obviously selected heavy armor because it's fucking cold outside.
That's fair.
And I figured that if this kid is going to be getting dressed up in a costume, it would be best for them to be rugged up as much as possible. I'm not shitting you. That is actually the reason why I chose
This is
heavy
like 8-year-old as played by father.
Yeah, this is me again going, you need to put your jumper on.
Son, you can play rebelliously, but only if I facilitate this rebellious play.
You know what would be a really good costume? A parka. No one expects a superhero in a parka. And knee pads. That'll show them.
I did just want to point out that in the process of Chris continuing to sketch here, there are a few camera cuts, and there's one in particular. It can't be anything other than a point of interest reveal because we get a camera that's low to the ground. Chris is in the background at his table, out of focus, and the camera dollies across past a cushion to reveal what I've described here on my notes as a Scorpion car.
Yes.
Super duper obvious, pretty much dead in the middle of the bottom of frame. Anyway, it seemed like such an obvious placement that I was curious to see whether it would be pertinent. And spoilers, it was. We'll find out about that in just a moment. The third choice that I'm offered in the creation of my amazing superhero costume is whether or not to make it dark or colorful. Or, to phrase it a different way, DC or Marvel. So I picked the only correct choice, of course, which is Marvel. And I went with a colorful.
I mean, have you seen the trailer for Shazam? They're trying for colorful. They're trying.
Found them.
And as Chris goes to complete the sketch of our Captain Spirit, we can see that his wall is covered in other drawings. This is clearly something that he does quite frequently. The implication here with me making these choices is that he is creating Captain Spirit on the fly, but I'm not entirely sure that's the case. I have a feeling that Captain Spirit is a character that he's had in his sort of varied cast that perhaps is becoming the focus of today's activities rather than something new that he's just created. The identity of Captain Spirit and how and when Chris came up with them is, I think, pretty integral to understanding what the game is trying to convey. So I was curious if either of you have any thoughts about Captain Spirit and in what way Chris relates to him.
I think in watching back your footage before we recorded, it certainly came across to me that Captain Spirit is a mainstay in the stable of characters that the child uses to play with. And it sort of came across as initially strange that he was designing the costume then. So I kind of took that to mean that in a American Horror Story kind of way, Chris is running an anthology series in which Captain Spirit is always present, right? And it's like, so today we're playing Space Rescue, and Captain Spirit will need his Space Rescue costume, etc. So certainly it seemed to me that Captain Spirit has always been there, or at least has been around for a while, and perhaps around so long that Captain Spirit needs a fresh coat of paint every now and then.
It's like 1960s Batman.
Right.
Captain Spirit is how this kid is processing living in an environment like this.
Right.
And the Captain Spirit at this point represents sort of the persistence of optimism, but a realistic optimism.
Right.
So it seems at this point just to be a way that this kid sort of facilitates his imagination, channels what he can see to be good qualities into an avatar that also acts as, you know, something to think about instead of the never-ending snow outside.
Right. So the game allows me to sort of bask in my choices here, because the title screen for the game is looking down at Chris's illustration of Captain Spirit sitting on the table as he gets up to begin his day, and the awesome adventures of sort of gets drawn in on the screen next to his illustration of Captain Spirit. So I thought that was a nice little touch of not quite fourth walling, but sort of layering the game on top of the environment.
I just watched Where the Wild Things Are for the second time in my life the other day.
Yep.
And it has a Crash opening title card that is so similar to this, and functions in a really similar way, and sort of just facilitating. It's facilitating a more calm type of child's play in this. It's way more frenetic and terrifying in Where the Wild Things Are, but yeah, really cool. I really like that that style of saying this is the game.
Okay, so now that all of this is done, the camera now transitions to an Uncharted style third person over the shoulder cam. It's probably the easiest touchstone to refer to. And Chris announces that it's Saturday morning and he can do anything that he wants today. So I start having a poke around in Chris's room to see all of the things that are here, and lo and behold, directly in front of me is a Scorpion car.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And I see it. I recognize it. It is apparently called a shark stinger, but having had my attention drawn so clearly to it at the beginning, I, of course, walk over to it, hit the A button to play with it, and Chris sits down and begins setting up another little sort of action playing with toys scenario in which the shark stinger is going to run over an innocent pedestrian, another one of these wooden toys. And I'm given the option, as Chris holds the shark stinger in one hand and the pedestrian in the other hand, as to whether I'm going to do nothing to save the pedestrian or intervene. So a little bit of confusion here. I ended up opening the menu because I didn't know what fucking button to press, but do nothing had the A button very clearly labeled on it, and the other one just had kind of an icon on it that sort of kind of maybe perhaps looked like the start button on an Xbox controller. Yeah. I didn't know. I pressed it and I opened the menu. Clearly that didn't work, but the tutorial prompt flicked in on the top left-hand corner of the screen pretty soon after, telling me that I could switch with left trigger to use the power action. Of course I'm going to fucking use the power action because it requires me to press two buttons.
More buttons is better. Everyone knows that.
the feedback on intervene when I'm holding down the left trigger. A sound effect kicks in and a big sort of cartoony explosion is drawn around the word intervene with lightning bolts, and it's all shaking and jittering around. So holding left trigger has given me a lot more juice. Intervene seems like a cooler option and would certainly seem to be in keeping with the spirit of Captain Spirit. So I hold the left trigger, I press the intervene button, and as the Scorpion car, the shark stinger comes in, Chris sort of pretends to sort of force push it away with his hand. It goes flying across the room. And the pedestrian is very pleased having been saved once again by Captain Spirit.
Hey, Tony.
Yes.
I got a question for you.
Certainly.
Why do you think the game gave you the option to do nothing?
Well, the game very clearly wants me to intervene.
I think, yeah.
Because it's instructing me that there's a new button that I can use on the controller. It requires me to perform that action correctly. It gives me a ton of audio and visual feedback that makes that option seem way, way, way more appealing than the other one. This is in stark contrast, little Iron Man pun there for you, with the earlier choices that were side by side on the screen. Whereas these options are actually tied to the physical location, the screen location of the objects in question. So I think it's kind of got me on the hook here in terms of tutorialization, in terms of how to operate things. But also once I'm learning, oh shit, okay, I got to hold the trigger to do this thing. Just the juice that comes pouring off of this thing when I do it. Of course, I'm going to press that button.
And I guess it's cool too, because if you screw up and hit do nothing, or if you hit do nothing out of curiosity, then I guess it's also saying that this is an aspect of the kid that exists too.
That's true, and I mean, I guess I don't know because I didn't select that option, but perhaps there's an opportunity there to start defining whether Captain Spirit is someone who always succeeds.
Yeah.
Or is always able to intervene.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so the next thing that I have the opportunity to do as Chris, because when the camera is given back to me in terms of controlling, there's a TV right in front of me. So I wander on over to see what I can do with that. And once again, I can hold the left trigger to perform a power action and use my brain waves to activate the monitor. So once again, if you're applying this through the Life is Strange filter, there's another telekinesis sort of fake out thing here with the raised hand and the concentration and the shaking camera and the click, but it's then revealed that Chris was just holding the remote control behind him.
Just in case the telekinesis didn't work.
Which means it wouldn't have worked, which means it is telekinesis.
Exactly.
So there's a few other things that I look around at. One of them is a note that Chris has written to Santa, with him asking for a few different things that he's wanting to get for Christmas. Anyway, pretty soon thereafter, I hear somebody calling Chris breakfast from outside the room. And the options that I'm now given, which is this time on a timer, is okay or be right there. Those both seem fairly similar to me. So in the typical style of a young child, I don't really have a choice. I can merely flavor how belligerent my positive response is.
You can say okay apathetically, or you can say be right there sarcastically.
So I piped out be right there, and then I decided, well, you know what? I said I'd be right there. There's probably a ton of other stuff to investigate in this room, but I'm actually going to head out immediately.
This is playing a kid via a parent.
You said you would be right there.
So I head outside into the kitchen, and there is a man here who I assume is Chris's father. He is cooking at the stove. Chris wanders over to the dinner table, sits down, and the father actually looks around and comments, "This is a first. I didn't have to tell you twice." I had a damn good chuckle at that.
Something's different about you. It's like you're being controlled.
And Chris responds with, "The food smelled good." And his father responds with, "You know how to work the ref." The things that I'm getting here from this immediate interaction, having just been introduced to this father, is that they do have a rapport. There's clearly some to and fro at work here. They're comfortable with speaking to one another. This doesn't feel awkward or uneasy, but I can also see a shitload of beer cans sitting on the bench next to the dad as he's cooking. So I'm already getting that. I'm already getting that little sort of spider sense. We're going to just bring out all of the superhero cliches My spider sense is tingling here that something is amiss.
Yeah.
Dad also looks just a fraction scruffy.
Yep.
Anyway,
And you got another sporting reference there as well.
yes, you know how to work the ref.
Yeah.
Chris sits down for breakfast and his dad instructs him to pour himself some milk. And then Chris, without my prompting, as part of this little cutscene, lifts his hand once more and pretends to telekinese. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is now. And his father immediately wanders over, zooms the milk carton around, pours the milk out, and says, "Milk mission accomplished." As a simple, straightforward, and very succinct way of conveying the father's buy-in to Chris's mode of play and kind of his construction of I have Jedi powers. So to put it bluntly, how much does a simple sequence of interactions so far tell us about the relationship or the apparent relationship between Chris and his dad? Because as players, we're coming into this totally blind, which is the opposite of Chris's experience, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a truth in the way that Chris responds to the questions that indicates he's very well aware that his dad is trying to facilitate a good environment, that he wants that to be the case. And so therefore he's going to indulge in the stuff that Chris does that he can at the very least kind of get on board with. So responding to his play in a way that's kind of dorky and also final in that...
And it's an indulgence that doesn't require an ongoing investment.
It's an indulgence that is, I acknowledge you. Yep. Now, let me get back to what I was doing.
Steve.
There's an effort here being made to meet the child on their level, even though that seems perhaps begrudging.
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily read that as a relationship in tatters, necessarily.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But there is a sense in the way Chris responds. Saying he's on eggshells is, I think, overstating it. But it feels like Chris is trying to shortly and sweetly move forward to whatever the next thing he needs to be doing.
Yeah.
So not lingering in the banter.
Yeah.
Like the banter happens and then it's done. And now it's on to what is your next instruction, father?
Let's just hold hands and jump off the cliff into this giant pool of heteronormativity here. But the one great big glaring thing that is obvious here is let's lay out the facts. It's a Saturday morning. Chris comes out to the kitchen. His dad is cooking breakfast, and his dad is the only adult there.
Yep.
There's already a pervading sense here of where is mum. Coming into this fresh, that's kind of the first question on my mind. Also in part because I can see that once I'm out of Chris's bedroom, the house looks a little tatty. There are kind of just, it's not an absolute disaster. It's not a giant mess, but there's just a little bit of clutter. And it also, to my eye, in a couple of spots, looks like there have been photos or paintings removed from the walls, which is a telling sign of quote-unquote not good things. So now that the milk mission is accomplished, Chris's dad has dished him up some toast and some scrambled eggs and immediately heads back over, grabs a can of beer, and takes a good old long sip. And Chris kind of pecks at the breakfast, puts his fork down, and then his dad says, "What did you expect, a waffle?" And my options, presented side by side in much the same style as heavy armor and light armor, are "it's good" or "I like mums." I don't know where mum is. I don't know if mum is. I don't know why mum isn't there. There is no fucking way that I am pressing "I like mums."
Like, watching that back, that definitely seems like, do you want to play Chris as a child that just wants to start some shit?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and I mean, like, this kind of the same as the do nothing or intervene, right?
like for the context we have, there's no way that we can reason out that this child should say, your food is bad, somebody else's food is better.
So I selected "it's good." Trying to think about this, Steve, in the context of do I want Chris to be somebody who starts some shit? I guess what's the easiest way to say this? The game already has me on the hook because I am already trying to figure out what would I do in this situation if I were a child.
Yeah.
And my dad had posed this to me.
Had posed a trap to you, yes.
Yeah, and yes, I am making this, I am being presented with this choice to make not having all of the knowledge of Chris's life that clearly, presumably, he has, like where his mum is or isn't.
Yeah, but I think that preferring mums is the truth, and so it's asking you whether or not you're going to, you know, save a bit of dignity for your dad or just
Sure.
be honest.
Right. I was a bit taken aback by the escalation.
Yeah.
To me, this seemed more of, you will select it's good, but we want you to have the inner monologue of, this is not good. Right?
Yeah.
So we are pushing some of the internal logic that Chris has into the player by making them make this choice, because it's the right one to make here to stay in the role. But the other thing that came to my mind about the way they're showing you these is perhaps that to Chris, these are all equally heavy decisions to make in his life, right? To Chris, am I truthful with Dad that I don't like his breakfast, or do I play along that it's okay, is just as important as whether or not Captain Spirit wears the mask on today's mission or the helmet.
That's a really good point.
So when I respond, it's good, Dad responds, you can lie better than that. And Chris insists that, no, the eggs are good. And Dad says, look, you won't hurt my feelings if you don't love my eggs. I know it doesn't compare to your mother's breakfast. He comes over and sits down at the table next to Chris and places his hand on his wrist as he's talking to him. So shit's getting real here. So his dad then claims that he's going to watch some cooking shows and learn how to be a super breakfast chef. And Chris can be his official food taster. And Chris kind of, in a very perfunctory way, agrees to this plan that I'm sure will absolutely 100% happen in the very near future.
Totally.
So as Dad is saying this, he has got a beer in his hand. He's brought it over to the table. He places it down. See Chris's eyes glance to it as he puts it on the table. And then the game presents me with another option. I can press X to say, plan for today, ? I can press B to say, you're drinking. One is a question, one is a statement.
But both are saying the same thing.
I mean, it might be a question.
Both are allowing the same topic of discussion, but one is more direct.
I think this question, and just to throw interpretations out again, I think this question is sort of allowing you at this point, you know, like at this point you've got an understanding that Chris's dad probably has a problem with alcohol. And so I think at that point it's inviting you to determine whether Chris is still trying or whether he's sick of his dad's shit.
Right.
And that's for a collection of, you know, sort of 4 sum total words. That's quite specific.
Yep. Well, for a number of reasons, most especially because the game has moved from sort of showing all of this beer in an incidental way to quite literally plonking it directly in front of me. I thought, well, if the game is going to invite me to be direct, I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity to be direct. And I select you're drinking. And Chris says, you're drinking beer before you eat, ? And Dad's response in an almost disbelieving, I can't believe I'm having to explain this again fashion, is, yes, it's a game day. Dads are allowed to drink early. And he takes another swig. And then after his swig, he says that he doesn't need a lecture from his son, thanks. And he sort of gets up and mutters that he doesn't drink that much. And then he stares at the fridge for a little while and then wheels around and says, I mean, what am I supposed to do in this fucking town? Go to church like all these assholes? And then he immediately apologizes and tells Chris, don't swear. And Chris's response is amazing. He says, I don't. Superheroes don't swear.
Not the cool ones.
So there's been a fairly swift and rapid escalation here. And by this point, I was feeling worried.
I was feeling like Chris needs to go back to his room.
I was very much wanting that to happen as well. But by this point, I as a player am realizing it's really hard to convey this without it sounding trite. I'm getting an idea of how bad this is. And I also know that there's enough here that I don't know how volatile this could get.
Yep.
But it's clearly taken a turn because in discussing the beer before breakfast directly, clearly Dad's getting agitated. It's also pretty clear to me that these are the only two people in the house, and I don't know where this is going to go. And I'm also, at the moment, I'm observing. I'm not being asked to do anything.
Yep.
So when Dad comes back over to the table and sits down again and gestures to Chris's arm, which I now noticed has some bruises on it, and says, "Hey, is your arm okay? Has anyone said anything about it?" I was sort of sitting in my chair going, "Oh, fuck." And then the game presents me with another response choice. I can say it's fine, or I can say it kind of hurts, and that's the end of the 10 minutes.
It's nicely timed.
Yeah. Yeah. It just keeps escalating.
Like right now, it feels really. I don't have a good word for it. Right now, this feels like a natural. Well, other than the very last second, the tension and the uneasiness feels very understated.
Right.
And for me to infer,
Yes.
does it continue to do that, or does it just start bludgeoning me with, I want you to feel bad about this? So I think that's a thing that rubs people the wrong way when these kind of situations are being dealt with in
Right.
storytelling or video games or whatever.
Right.
Is when that nuance goes away.
The game's kind of grabbing you by the scruff of the neck here and going, you need to understand what this is and how this is, because you need to be informed so that you understand what you're doing for the rest of this experience. And that you can start to build your own framework as to why you're going to do things, or when you're going to do things, or how you're going to do things. It's not shying away from the fact that this is not a good situation, but it also has told me nothing at all about why this is the situation. And that's in a big part of what you slowly start to unfold and uncover as you continue playing. But at this exact moment, what I'm left with is a choice between, if we're going to run this through the same framing that you said before, Aaron, of telling the truth or pretending that it's okay, there's a fairly clear trajectory of how real shit is.
Yeah, but it's still kind of, it filters through the rest of what this 10 minutes was painting for me, which is that this abusive relationship has been normalized.
Yep.
That Chris has found a way to verbally navigate it to the point that he's, in his head, it's legitimate to engage directly with the bruises on his arm that presumably his father put there. And that his father seems to feel comfortable, both consciously and subconsciously, soliloquizing to himself about his addiction while talking to his son. Yeah, this is this has left me kind of knocked out, which I think is the idea.
So do you have a desire to play more of this game, Aaron?
It's a complicated question.
Because if we're going to, I mean, part of the reason why we do this show and why we have this sort of arbitrary framework of playing the first 10 minutes of a game is that in that opening, a game should be able to convey to you what it is and how to play it. That doesn't necessarily address why to play it or whether you want to play it. I mean, we're already kind of dipping into a 10-minute check territory here. It's pretty straightforward that the game has told us how to play. There are a series of button presses that we can use to select options, and we can maneuver around a world investigating objects and interacting with things. And in terms of what it's about, we've already been touching on it here. I think you tied a bow around that rather nicely there, Aaron, when you said this is about a toxic relationship that has been normalized. But it's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe we could break with tradition here, because I played all of this, so I kind of can't answer the question. But do you want to keep playing this game? And that doesn't have to be a hard yes, no. I'm more curious about why you feel the way that you feel.
Well, look, I'm not hiding in any way, shape, or form that I am identifying personally with the content in this game. And so I can't answer yes or no whether or not this is a game that I ever want to play. But as someone who very much could be, and in some ways was triggered by watching this footage,
Right.
I appreciate the candor with which they approached it.
Right.
The fact that I was given the opportunity to see the signifier that semiotically told me what I was in for in a way that I would definitely notice.
Right.
That I would definitely be able to see and go, oh, okay, not for me. or
Right.
I'll continue.
Right.
So yeah, eventually one day, I imagine I'll play it.
Steve?
In terms of would I want to keep playing? I think that what I've seen so far, if I had been playing this 10 minutes, I would have continued playing to whatever the next section was. It sounds like after this conversation ends, there's another exploration section.
Yeah.
I think that is the point where I would have allowed myself to consider if I wanted to play this game or not.
Right.
I would not have clocked out at this point. There is enough. There's enough urgency here that I feel like I'm already invested in Chris, that I want to get him safely out of the kitchen. But after that would be a point where maybe I would consider, hey, is this a thing I want to spend my time with and wallow around in? I think for me personally, I probably would continue playing this game. I think I would enjoy the kind of thing that it is. I enjoy playing the kind of style of game. And I don't think there's been anything here that's necessarily pushed me away from wanting to see what this particular one of those is about.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially since this seems to be moving at a pace. It certainly doesn't feel like it's dawdling.
Oh, it's motivated.
And I think that is, for me personally, that's normally the thing that shies me away from games in this kind of genre, is if I feel like they're moving slowly, and this is not doing that.
Right.
In terms of a question around, do I want to spend my mental energy on characters that are like this? That's probably a better question for my non-existent shrink.
It'd probably just be another question. But a really good question.
So for me, I stopped the recording here and I just kept playing this, and I played it all the way through to its conclusion, all in one sitting, because I wanted to understand what was happening and why it was happening. Because while this introduction is doing a very remarkable job of sort of setting the scene and bringing me to an understanding of this situation. I think, as I said before, I don't know how it got to this point. But I am already building a bunch of assumptions. I'm building a bunch of assumptions about Chris. I'm building a bunch of assumptions about his dad. I'm building a bunch of assumptions about his mother and in general about his life. And I really wanted to know whether those assumptions were correct. And I don't have enough information to know that yet. And I needed to find out. So it was very compelling in that regard.
Totally.
All right. Were there any other elements or moments here that you wanted to discuss?
There are only a few small other things I noted. I really appreciated watching back through your footage how plainly everything is presented. Like, I think there would have been a temptation here to fantasticalize all the imaginary stuff that Chris is doing.
Yeah.
I really like that it's not.
It's very opening of Toy Story, but even like kind of further stripped back than that. Like if Toy Story was set in Alaska with poor people.
Right. Again, playing into my knowledge of Life is Strange, my assumption here is that there's going to be a very strong component of magical realism happening here. So that is pervading my interpretation of all of this because I'm familiar with the universe.
But this is a place where supernatural things occur.
Yep.
Right.
Any other points, Steve?
So when with the what was the name of the car? The shark stinger?
Yes, the shark stinger.
I was wondering in your description of that if it felt, or if it seemed like it was trying to teach you to create your own problems. It's like it's pushing you towards you as the player need to engage in these problems so that you can use your magical powers to get out of them.
That is fucking super duper where the wild things are in terms of like I was having just what like my takeaway from watching Where the Wild Things Are again was that this film was actually Max the kid in the movie, his interpretation of his favorite childhood book as a way of dealing with the emotional shit that's surrounding him right now. So that could be similar to what Chris is doing, in that Chris is setting up, facilitating moments with his toys that parallel moments in his life that he can then act upon.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's going to be either mechanically something that the game wants you to do later, or whether that's more a reflection of Chris creating problems he can solve in contrast to presumably his inability to solve real-world problems like his dad's drinking.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that maybe that's filtering even further into the idea of Captain Spirit as opposed to Captain Power or Captain Problem Solver.
Yep.
Captain Cure.
Captain Logical Thinker.
Captain Cure for Addiction.
I mean, looking back on it and reflecting, yes, but in the moment, as I was experiencing it, taking a very practical approach to this and going, I'd put a weird thing in front of the camera so that I wanted to click on it so I could learn the buttons. But it can be both.
Yeah.
These things are not mutually exclusive. Yeah.
And this feels like a game that on reflection, like or on a second pass through, will sort of glean a lot of this stuff a lot further.
Yep. Yes, definitely something that I intend to revisit, but I need to give it a bit more time before I do that. Alrighty, well, if there aren't any other things to talk about, and we've sort of already done the 10-minute check,
Indeed.
then I think that means that it's time for the plugs.
Okay, plug time. Welcome. It's plugs. Here in the plugs, we tell you how to get in contact with us. Because we'd love to hear from you, and you might have things you want to tell us. That might be things you liked or disliked or thoughts you had about topics that were raised. We'd love to hear any of that, any and all of it. So you can either do that via email. The email address would be contact@thefirst10minutes.com. Or you can get at us on the social medias. So we are on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Libsyn, Instagram. And that's probably the main ones to find us on. In all those places, we are the first 10 minutes. You can give us a message there with whatever's on your mind, and we can get back to you. If you wanted to get in touch with any of us individually, then Aaron, you're out and about on the internet. If someone wants to get at you,
Oh, yeah, totally. Occasionally I check Twitter.
There you go.
That is at Rundown Flamingo, spelled how it sounds. What about you, Tony?
If you want to get in touch with me on Twitter, you can get me at Kalinscald. That's Kalinskald. And I also do another podcast called Downloadable Context, where I talk to game developers about what makes them tick. You can find that at downloadablecontext.com. Hey, Steve.
hi, welcome back.
Hey.
It's me again.
Where can people get in touch with
This
you?
is a video games podcast.
Yeah. I'm on Twitter at _Steve Halliwell. Or you can just find all my stuff from stevehalliwell.com if you're after it.
So that brings us to a close for another episode. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you again next time.
Bye.
Later.
See ya.